Hey guys, I don't know if you remember this, but last August we did a sermon series called I Love My Church, and I Love My Church. Pastor Nicole here with Jared, and we're doing part 2. Maybe you remember his story. We started to unpack that on August 28th, and that sermon in the I Love My Church series was called With Jesus, All Things Are Possible. And we did not get to finish his whole story, and so we wanted to make sure that we got that to you because it's just so powerful. But before we do that, just in case you haven't heard the story, I want to invite you to go to our YouTube channel, and you'll pull up this the sermon from August 28th, 2022, to make sure you get the full spectrum of that. We're not going to be able to go all the way into that today, but Jared, why don't you just summarize for us what get us to the point where we're going to get to today?
Yeah, so really late October of 2021, I began having noticeable chest pain when I was like working or exerting myself, and so I went in to see a cardiologist, and in short, he basically said, you're young, I don't really see this as an issue, but I'll go ahead and schedule some tests. So I had tests coming up. The first test that I had scheduled was January 5th, and then another test was TBD. Hadn't been scheduled yet. So I was on my way to go to Arizona, and my cardiologist decided he'd give me some EKGs. So I had an EKG there, and I actually had another one at a different date. So I had 2 in total. Came back totally normal. So I was going down to Arizona for a Friendsgiving, and I was supposed to land like on November 19th around maybe 3 o'clock or so. I can't remember the exact time that I was supposed to touch down in Phoenix, but I was supposed to land, whatever. But my flight had been delayed like time and time again, and I didn't end up landing until maybe 8 p.m. or after that time. And so we were supposed to go up to my buddy's cabin in Munns Park, but which is a very small town, and there's like literally only a gas station in the whole entire town. And so we were supposed to go up there, which is kind of in the middle of nowhere. Like it's 2 hours from Phoenix. There's no hospitals around that area. No paramedics. There's really nothing there. Yeah, there's like literally nothing there. But we were supposed to do that, but because my flight had been delayed too much, we decided that we'd go to a little like country dance hall that night. So I landed, finally got to the hall hours after I was originally supposed to get to Arizona. And then it was like a normal night. We used to go dancing all the time, so nothing was out of the ordinary. But we went in. I did a line dance. I walked off the dance floor, and I collapsed. My friends described that I looked like I tried to muscle myself up, but right after that, it was just like I had flatlined, like I was totally gone. My buddy got on the phone, called the paramedics. There happened to be an off-duty EMT standing right next to me when I collapsed, who immediately began CPR. The paramedics were across the street just waiting for a call, and the top medical hospital in that area, level 1 trauma center, was only 7 miles from where I was.
It's absolutely incredible, and that's why I want to encourage you, if you did not catch his full testimony, this is just part 2, because there are so many things that really just God, you can just see the handprints of God all over the situation, where with Jesus, all things are possible. So Jared, that was November 19th, 2021, 300 days ago from today, that you dropped on the floor after dancing one dance, and you flatlined. Basically, you died.
Yeah, I died medically. The paramedics came in, and they began trying to shock my heart back. They attached AED pads to me, so they cut my clothes off, attached the pads. They shocked me time and time again to finally get a heartbeat of about 4 beats per minute. I was rushed to the hospital. On my way to the hospital, I had seizure after seizure after seizure. From the minute I collapsed, I never gained consciousness. So I was completely out until, if you go back and watch, you'll know that I was completely out until the following Monday.
I know that the hospital had to call his parents. He lives in Oakdale, California, so his parents had to make the long drive down to Arizona because there are no flights that would get them there faster than driving. And the hospital would call and check in with your parents, and they wanted to know what drugs you were on. They just could not believe that you weren't doing anything, and they did a toxicology. There was no drugs in your system, no alcohol in your system. Then their next question was, had you had the COVID vaccine? And they said no, that you hadn't. There was absolutely no medical reason, basically, for you to collapse and have this this issue. But the doctors began to, like, what do you call it? Like freezing your body, basically, to cool your body down so it can begin to heal itself, if it's going to heal itself.
Yeah, so I was immediately put into the ER, and then I was there for a few hours, and then shortly after I was transferred because I had died and my body went without oxygen for so long. Their main concern is going to be your brain. I always say they can fix everything, but they cannot fix the brain. And so I went into the neuro ICU where they began freezing my body. I was intubated, which is basically like getting put on life support. And I was having a machine run my body as I was intubated and being frozen down to my core body temperature was being brought down, which then kind of, when your body is in a cold state like that, your brain doesn't have to use as much power to run your bodily functions because they're running at a much slower pace. So then my my brain could have a chance of healing if it was going to heal.
So this happened on Friday night, and I think that you had said that the cooling down process takes, like, I think 14 hours or something like that to kind of medically freeze your body almost. And so into Saturday, when your parents and your family get there, you're pretty much cold to the touch.
Ice cold, yeah.
Ice cold. Your sister's a nurse, and she had really never experienced that before. But I want to get to what you experienced. When you were in this intubated and on full life support, what did you experience? Did you have any visitation from the Lord or anything like that happened?
Yeah, so from listening to Darren's story, I learned later that a lot of people that are in that kind of state, usually they go through like a really hard time mentally. Like usually it's really treacherous actually. But I didn't have that kind of experience at all. So my body, when I was in this state, my body was in a very large body of water. I don't know if it's like an ocean or a lake or whatever, but it was a very, very large body of water. Like when you look out, it goes on forever. Like you could never see an end to this body of water.
Wow.
And my body is submerged in the water, and I could see the top, but I'm underneath the surface of the water. And my body, although I'm in the water, I don't feel like I'm wet. Like I was so dry, even though my body was fully submerged. And all I can remember is the water was just the brightest blue you could ever imagine. I mean, the intensity of the blue was so great, but your eyes could never hurt. Nothing could ever hurt. It was just so incredible. And above me, surrounding me, like a big coliseum with like an open top, like if you could imagine like a football coliseum with like an open sky, were just deer antlers. They were all intertwined, and it was the most beautiful thing I could ever imagine. And then my body was wrapped in these, I'll call them like cloaks. Mm-hmm. They weren't really cloaks, but the material I couldn't even describe. It was indescribable using earthly terms.
What color was the material?
The material was white. It was like a white material, and it was just swaddled all around me, and it was flowing in the water. But again, I wasn't wet, even though everything around me was just flowing. And when I was watching, I could see my perspective of myself, and I'm looking up, and the intensity of the light coming in was so incredible, and it was just so blue. Everything was just so blue, like so many shades of this blue, and it was just like
I love that whenever you had talked to me
color.
about it, at one point you had said that you would call it blue with your own earthly definition, because there's really not a definition to define what you saw, because it's almost like Crayola can't scratch the surface on the color of blue that he saw because there were so many shades of it, and it's just so vibrant. That is just amazing. And what was your emotional state of being? What did you feel? What were you feeling when you were in the water?
Yeah, when I was in the water, I was in my own perspective, like I could see everything that was going on, but I also could see myself. So it was like had a perspective of myself, like my own eyes looking up, and then I also saw myself looking at myself in the water, submerged in the water with all of this going on around me. And when I was in that space, I was just so at peace. Like I mean, I know I've told you that I could not even conjure up a negative emotion because I don't even think where I was, negative emotion could even exist. It was just so incredible, like the amount of peace that just overwhelmed me. And the minute I was in that place and knew how much peace was like wrapping me, it was like I knew I was going to wake up and be 100% fine. There was no doubt in my mind that when I woke up, I was just going to wake up just the same that I was when I went in there.
On November 21st, we would have been having church, and you said for some reason you could almost pinpoint that we were praying for you because something began to happen in your life. And it's really interesting to me because if you remember back in April, we shared Darren Dowd's story in our sermon series, With Jesus, All Things Are Possible. And his story was that he really felt like when we were praying for him that something had happened and there was something that shifted in his body and he began to breathe with the machine. Now, you were telling us that you really felt it was the same thing that happened with you, that we were praying for you at church and something happened. Share with us what happened.
Yeah, so to go back a little bit, if you watched the YouTube from back in August when we gave the kind of a fuller version, Nicole mentioned how my mother would hold the phone up to my ear, and although I was on so much medication, which I shouldn't have been reacting to anything, my body would start shaking, and she'd hold the phone up to my ear and it'd have like worship music on or people praying, whatever it was, and my body would start reacting to it. Well, what I assume would be on Sunday while you guys were all praying, when I'm looking at my body at one point while I was in this state began rising, like lifting up. It started moving and it never left the water, but it began reaching the surface of the water. And it was so incredible. And you could just feel like, it was almost like I could feel people's hands like underneath me, like pushing my body up. Although I was in the water, it was like so much support underneath me lifting. It was really incredible, especially because if you know about, especially lifting somebody out of the water, like that's a lot of, it's a lot of weight to try to get someone out of the water when you're in the water. And it was just incredible. I don't know, the sensation was just incredible. And just being able to see it from the two perspectives was also crazy because I'm sitting there looking and I'm like, I can see myself rising up to like this Coliseum, almost like I'm being lifted up to the Coliseum. And then I can also see my body on the other perspective and I can noticeably see myself rising. And it was just incredible.
That's amazing. What I think is so interesting is that you were so medicated and your mom is putting the phone up to your ear and your body's reacting and responding to worship and your body's responding, your spirit, man, inside of you is responding to prayer. And the nurses were like, he's not supposed to be moving. And they're like trying to give you more medication. But it was really like, it doesn't matter what we do on earth, God is the most powerful out of everything, and it just shows you the power of prayer. And I love that your story is so similar to Darren's because Darren said that he literally could feel people's prayers and it was just lifting him. He kept using that word. It was just lifting and lifting and lifting. And I just love the fact that you're saying the same thing. And it just really lets all of us know how important prayer is. And it's like literally when you see something on Facebook or someone calls you or texts you, or don't just drop the praying hands emoji, but really pray. And you really petition the throne of God for that because there is so much power in prayer. Like 300 days ago, you guys, 300 days ago, Jared was dead. And because of the power of prayer and because God has a bigger plan than all of us, he's sitting with us today. And I just think it's so incredible that you're able to experience all this. So, you mentioned being in a body of water and the color so intense and so blue and so vivid that it didn't hurt, even though it was the brightest, intensest color that you've ever seen. You described being at peace, and I love that. One thing that really stood out to me was that you said, even if you tried to conjure up a negative emotion, it would not have been allowed there. And that's really what we should take away from that as well, is that when we're in the presence of God, the enemy can't be there. So like if he's coming at you and lying to you or trying to deceive you or to steal, kill, and destroy like he does, you have got to really position yourself, position your heart, position your spirit to be in the presence of God, because then fear has to leave. All the chaos has to go away. And that's why prayer is so important, because with Jesus, all things are possible, and there is nothing but peace. I always tell when people ask me questions, and how do you know what to do? I always just say, don't follow your heart, because the Bible says that the heart is deceitful. Follow peace, because Jesus is the Prince of Peace. And when you follow peace, you're just so settled. And so I just want to encourage you guys. That is so powerful to me, that he was in the presence of God. He was in the presence of Jesus. He was swaddled in this white cloak and having this amazing experience, but there was no fear. Like, he was frozen physically. His body was frozen, okay? Like, he's in a medically induced state, and he's intubated, but he's not afraid at all. I think that's so powerful. One of the scriptures that I thought was so powerful, and it kind of went with this, was that Psalm 42, 1 and 2 says, "As the deer pants for water, so I long for you, O God. I thirst for God, the living God." And I think that the psalmist gives us this beautiful image of a deer that's so desperate to have a drink of water, and that compares to our desperate need to be in the presence of God. And I just love the fact that we were sharing your story in the middle of the story of Jesus' longest conversation in the Gospels with the woman at the well, where he was offering her this gift of living water that would completely change her life, and that it was something that would satisfy her and she'd never go thirsty again. And then the fact that you have this experience in the water, and then you see all these deer around. And it just reminds me when Jesus told the woman, "Whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them a spring of water welling up to eternal life." And so I love that it connects to the deer there into the Old Testament with the psalmist and into the New Testament. I wanted to share it with you, and then I'm going to let you pray into it on your own. But there are a lot of things that happen to you in the middle of this frozen state when you're really experiencing the Lord in a different way. And I have this prophetic book basically that helps you understand your dreams and visions that God gives you. And I believe that instead of being in a fear state, you're in a faith state, and God was there. But so just some things that you said that stood out to me, and that I was able to dig into this book, is that the water obviously represents the Holy Spirit. It represents the Word of God. It represents a cleansing and also a deep desire for God. Being under the water means death of the flesh, and it also means being in the Spirit and baptism. The color blue represents heaven, the Holy Spirit, healing, being complete, peace, and it also represents authority. The color white represents holiness and purity. It represents being washed and also ready for the harvest. And isn't it interesting that at the end of this sermon series, the very conclusion of it was us focusing on the harvest is white and ripe and ready. I think that was so interesting that it kind of ties into this sermon series. And then the cloak that you said, I'm not really sure what it is, but that's what I'll call it, because that's really a God-deposited word in you. It represents righteousness, and it represents authority. It represents a mantle, and it represents God's glory. Then the deer, of course, is someone who thirsts after God. It also represents a strong spiritual walk, and it also talks about reaching new heights. And I thought that was kind of interesting because you were being lifted, you know. And then also the deer represents sure-footedness. And so I would just encourage you to pray into that. I think that would, maybe you're on the right track here with God.
Yeah.
A deer antler represents a crown in the sky and spiritual authority and a regeneration. Did you know? I did not know this, but you probably know this because you're just a good old cowboy from Oakdale. But deer lose their antlers, and they are constantly regenerating and growing. That's regeneration and growth. Did you guys know that? I didn't know that. I learned that whenever I was looking all this up. And then being in the arena, don't be scared. It means that you will be in the public eye. Okay? And it also means success. And then the lifting, this prophetic dream interpretation book talks about the lifting is that talks about being redeemed and also a surrendering position. And just really watching you walk through this situation, and just the way that you are already serving God, but the way that you have just like fully given him every area of your life. So I wanted to just share some of those things with you that
thank
I
you.
had dug into, and I want you just to pray. I'm going to give this to you so you can have it, and I want you to pray
Thank
into
you.
it, because I really think that God's going to speak to you even more, and he'll clarify some of that stuff. So before we wrap up, I know that your story has touched so many people, and just share kind of what's happened since this has happened to you.
Yeah, so like a little bit of what I've been doing, or
Yeah, well, like I know some people have reached out to you, and even they've talked about considering their own relationship with Jesus
Yeah.
because of what you went through, and that like, it was just a kind of, a miracle.
Yeah, I mean, the minute I finally came kind of to in the hospital, I was given my phone back, and I mean, I'm not one to like dwell in lots of messages, but it was like hundreds and hundreds of messages on my phone, and it took me days to actually get through them. But there was just such an outpouring of love, and I was getting messages from people I haven't spoken to in forever. I mean, I was getting messages from people that I had known to be atheists, and told me that they were on their knees praying for me because they didn't know what else to do, and they just knew that they had to do something, and
That's so crazy.
the only thing that they could think to do.
I love that you said they were praying to a God that they weren't even sure existed or not, but they were feeling their prayers being answered. And then they see the revelation of that right there before their eyes.
Yeah.
That is incredible. Also, let's talk about the doctors. You have a Stanford doctor that you're in their care, and then another specialist in Arizona, and they said that you're a medical mystery basically, but also that apart from divine healing, there's no reason for you to be here. Is that what their words were?
Yeah, so it was crazy because my specialist at Stanford, I have 2 different doctors at Stanford that I see, and I have another cardiologist. I have a whole team of doctors. It's a lot of fun. Yeah, one of my top Stanford specialists told me exactly what you just said, that he's gone through every single ounce of my chart. I mean, he's gone line from line. I mean, he gave me information that I didn't even get until June because I just didn't even know. The hospital never informed me of certain information. And so, yeah, I mean, he's really on top of it. He knows his stuff. I mean, he's one of the top, doctors around. I mean, and he told me after going through my whole chart that there's no medical reason that I should have survived. And the only thing he can say is it's divine healing. I mean, and so, I mean, when you hear like a top medical doctor saying that, I mean, it's kind of crazy. But I had another specialist in Arizona tell me the same thing, almost the exact same words. And so it's just such a testament to like God's love for us and his power. I mean, he can do whatever he wants, right?
He can.
And so it's just to be just in the presence of him and live each day and trying to be in the presence of him every single day is just how I want to live my life from here on out. So
I love that. So that's changed you. I would say
it has
definitely changed you.
Yeah. Everything I want to do now in my life, I want to do for God. I used to do a lot of things because I thought other people needed me to do them, or I did things to make me feel better, or whatever it was. And now I only want to do things that I feel like God is leading me to do.
Wow, that's so good. If you didn't catch his full testimony, then you'll also know that he had injured his shoulder when he fell. He had a massive, what would you call it, contusion, or like what would you call it? Huge.
I don't know.
Huge
gash /
huge
bump.
something on his head. It was like the size of a
Giant
baseball
goose
back
egg.
there. Goose egg, yeah. He has a scar there. But God, he didn't wind up having a traumatic brain injury. What is your profession?
I'm a structural engineer.
A structural engineer. And they were worried whether his brain would ever come back. First of all, they thought that if he had, what was the percentage of you even coming out of the Widowmaker?
Oh, yeah. So
cardiac arrest.
Only about 6% of people who have a Widowmaker sudden death outside of the hospital, only about 6% of them will live. And then out of the 6% that do end up surviving, about 80% of those suffered severe brain damage. And a lot of them later pass on within like the first year of
Wow.
After they left the hospital. A lot of them pass away in that first year. And then so they gave me less than 1% to actually walk out of the hospital in the means that I did. And
Right.
nobody expected me to walk out. I mean, they didn't even, they had told my family there was actually a neuro rehab facility right next to the hospital. It was like almost
Wow.
connected. And they, my whole family, they had basically told them if I even survived, like I would be there for months, if not years, like rehabilitating my brain to even be able to like walk and eat and stuff.
Wow. And how long, so this happened on November 19th on a Friday night, and you walked out of the hospital on what day?
So yeah, it would have been the 27th, on Saturday the 27th, about
7
2
and a
o'clock.
half days later. And how long, let me see, have you gone back to work?
Yeah, I went back to work on the 32nd. It was the Wednesday, so maybe the 31st. It was the Wednesday after.
32nd. Wait a minute.
I mean,
Wait a
sorry,
minute.
that doesn't
what
exist.
Month has the 32nd? Wait a minute. Are we sure we're okay with that?
I was just adding days up. So if I got out on the 27th, no, it would have been that's a Saturday, and I went back
Seriously,
to work on a Wednesday.
you went back to work in less than 2 weeks.
No, I went back to work the Wednesday after. So less than 2 weeks after I passed away.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they were worried.
The only reason
if
I
your
went back
brain-
on Wednesday is because Tuesday. So every year, we can cut this part out, but every year I go Black Friday shopping at Bass Pro and I buy myself some flannels because they're only $10.
Yes,
and so
you can't beat it.
I missed it because I was in the hospital, but so I had to go. So the minute I got back, so we started driving back on
I have
Sunday.
to have my flannels.
Yeah, I had to have. So we started driving back from Arizona on Sunday. And then we got back on Monday because the drive was a lot for me to.
Yeah.
Right after that, it was too long of a drive for me to do in one day. Like I couldn't sit in the car that long.
For sure.
And my arm was kind of throbbing from surgery. But so yeah, we got back on Monday evening, and then Tuesday I had to go to Bass Pro. So that's the only. I would have went back to work Tuesday, but.
So we're not sure where you
We waited one more day.
So 10 days after walking out of the hospital, just 10 days after actually after dying, 10 days,
Yep,
you went
after
back to
dying.
work.
I
And
did.
you have no impairments, nothing's wrong with you. You are still, what is your profession?
A structural engineer. Yeah.
That would be, you definitely need your brain to do that. I would
not
say you
so
definitely
bad.
need to do your brain to do that. I think it's amazing is that with Jesus, all things are possible. And I love the fact that you have just jumped in with both hands, both feet, and you're like, I want to do whatever I can. And you want to do it all for the glory of God. And I also love the fact that I think that you've done 2 triathlons since November.
I have.
That's
did.
crazy. That's
Yeah, they're a lot of work.
it is, and a lot of like training and prep work. But my gosh, I think, didn't you say you finished 3rd place in your age category for just the swimming portion?
Well, I finished 3rd place total in one of them, and then I finished like 8th in a much larger one in the swimming portion.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Which was like a national one, so that was kind of cool.
And now you're coaching water polo?
Yeah, I coach water polo at the high school, Oakdale High School.
Wow, and then you swim?
Yeah, I swim. I need to swim more days than I currently do, but I do. Yeah, I get in the pool and I swim. I mean, yeah, I'm pretty active. I try to stay active. I mean,
what about line dancing? Have you?
Oh yeah, I go line dancing. I totally forgot about that. Yeah, I go
Yeah.
line dancing. I do like partner swing dancing and stuff.
How fun. I think we're going to have to start a line dance small group at church pretty soon. Jared will be our teacher. I bet I'm probably not the only person that's going to sign up for that. I could definitely use some help there. Really, you guys, we just wanted to bring this powerful conclusion to his testimony and really just encourage you. If you truly did believe that with Jesus all things are possible, what would you pray for? Like, how would it shift your focus for your own physical well-being? Maybe you're looking at a health crisis, or maybe you have a financial need that nobody knows about, or maybe you have a relational need with your spouse or a parent or a child or a friend, just maybe there's something like world peace that people would say, oh, why would you? With Jesus, all things are possible, right? What would you pray for if you really believe that? That's what I want you to ask today. And then I also want you just to remember that Jared said, even if he tried, there was no negative emotion that he could have mustered up in that place because That's really what happens when we're in the presence of God. And I want you just to remember that. And just step into your prayer closet, no matter where that is, or it could be anywhere. Just step away with God and spend that time with him, because all that negative energy that the enemy is trying to throw at you will definitely disappear, right?
Yeah, I used to I used to feel so guilty like praying for certain things, because I'd be like, no, like that's not fair. Like God has so many better things to do with his time, and I'd feel guilty for like even like the smallest things, like God help me score a goal today in one of my games or whatever it is, and I'd be like, that is such a terrible prayer to pray. But what I've learned through what I've gone through is there is no prayer, small or big, that he cannot answer. And so pray big.
Pray big, yeah.
There's no reason not to pray big. Like, don't be afraid. Don't think that's too much to ask from God. Like, there is nothing too big that God can't provide for us. And I just think that is such a heartwarming thing to know.
Absolutely. Hey, look, there have been times whenever I have been running errands and need to get to the next appointment. Maybe I need to meet with somebody at church, and I'm running an errand, and I've prayed for a front row parking place because I want to make sure I get to my next appointment. I have got that. I'm sure, yes, God has bigger things on his plan, but somehow that works out. But really, though, guys, with Jesus, all things are possible, and I want to thank you, Jared, for just opening up and sharing that. I know that it can be really challenging to have to go back to that emotional place, but we're going to ask you repeatedly, because when it's just like the woman at the well, her story was shared. She won her town, and God got the glory. And so I also want to just remind you, no matter what you walk through in life, your test can become a testimony, and your trial can become a triumph, where you can go out there and share and give God the glory. And I know that many people have come to saving grace, and many more will come to Jesus because you are sharing your story. So thank you so much for that.
Of course.
Amen.
Happy to be here.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much. Remember, with Jesus, all things are possible.